All right, welcome to Book by Book for February 23rd, 2022. Tonight, we're going to be reading Joshua 9 through 12 and discussing some of the different elements. And so this will be the end of the conquest portion of Joshua. And so this is, there's some very interesting things that go on here. There is a lot of, there's a good amount of lists as well. So the end is going to be lists, and it'll be what it'll be. But it starts out with, remember last week they went to Jericho and they defeated the city of Jericho, and Achan took some plunder he wasn't supposed to, and then they tried to attack Ai and they failed. And then they were like, why did we fail? And it was revealed that Achan had taken some things, and so then they eliminated Achan's family because of their disobedience and the shared responsibility for that disobedience. And then they went after Ai and they won because the Lord had seen that they removed the offense from the community. And so now, as we transition into chapter 9, we are going to see the effect of these two victories on the kings of Canaan. And we're going to start seeing Joshua leading the people of Israel through the rest of the conquest, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. And so chapter 9, verse 1, though, introduces us to a little bit of trickery from one of the people groups in Canaan. So verse 1 says, "Now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, being all the victories that had happened, the kings in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, 'We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us.' The Israelites said to the Hivites, 'But perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you?' 'We are your servants,' they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, 'Who are you and where do you come from?' They answered, 'Your servants come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. And our elders and all the living in our country said to us, take provisions for your journey, go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants, make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it and at home on the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are. And our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey. The Israelites sampled the provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live. And the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath." So here we see the kings in Canaan are coming together. They're building a coalition. Now, this coalition is never really going to take effect as we read through, but they are in the starting process of saying we need to come against Joshua and the Israelites in a united front. But that we'll see that won't actually come about. But instead of the Gibeonites, instead of joining in, they have their own plan, and they basically try to just pull one over on the Israelites. And so as you read the text, there are some things that are super obvious about the Gibeonites' strategy here. It's like, where are you from? Someplace far away. Don't worry about what it's called. We're from far away. And the reason for the people of Israel, like the Joshua's interrogation is like, but what if you're close? Is the reason he's asking that question is because they were told that they should not make a covenant or a treaty with any of the Canaanites. The Lord wanted them to completely eliminate the Canaanite people because of their offense in the land, because of their pagan practices, all of these different things. And so the Gibeonites were like, we don't want to go to war. Let's trick them. And so they dress up in all the ragged clothes and the moldy bread, and they go over to Gilgal, which is where they crossed the Jordan River. That was the camp at Gilgal. So Joshua and the army, they've defeated Jericho. They went north to Ai, and now they came back to Gilgal because they're going to start to work down a southern route for the conquest. And so they're back at Gilgal. The Gibeonites come and like, hey, make a treaty with us. And they, Joshua is asking questions. They're working through like, how can we know you're not close to us? And it's like, look at how moldy our bread is. Look at how ragged our clothes are. And so they look at it, they examine it, and they would say, okay, this seems like the truth. But there's a key detail in here in verse 14. The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. They didn't seek God. They didn't pray. They didn't use the Urim and the Thurim, with the priests. They didn't do any of that. They just were like, yeah, it seems legit. And so as we read this passage, like, we should recognize that, yeah, the Gibeonites are trying to avoid war, but the people of Israel have a standard to follow God's command and to do what he says. And so as they continue to march, they recognize something here in verse 16. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out, and on the third day came to their cities, Gibeon, Kephirah, and Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. So they've already made a peace treaty with these people. And so they shouldn't have made the peace treaty with the people, but their vow to the Lord that they would not attack the Gibeonites was more important to them, to hold on to that vow, because as we've read in the law, vows and oaths are sacred to the Lord. And so while they have made a mistake, they also cannot rectify that mistake by making another mistake and ignoring the vows. And so the whole assembly grumbled against the leaders. So everybody is turning against Joshua and the elders, saying, why did you do this? Why didn't you inquire of the Lord? But all the leaders answered, we have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them. They continued, let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly. So the leaders' promised to them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way from you? Well, actually, you live very near us. You are now under a curse, and you will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God. They answered Joshua, your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you. So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day, he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day. And so Gibeon is a 3-day trip from Gilgal. And so they hear, like, these people that we made this treaty with, they're really close. So everybody wants to attack them, but they can't. And so instead, they give him, they essentially make them servants of the tabernacle and eventually servants of the temple in Jerusalem. So when it says, and that is what they are to this day, that is an indication that there may have been an editor sometime later in the history here for the people of Israel, well after Joshua, well after David even established the city of David and the mountain where the temple was going to be built. And so they're saying, like, they're still doing this. The Gibeonites are still responsible for gathering the wood that would be burned at the altar, as well as the water that was going to be used for cleansing all of the sacrifices. And so they are entering into this covenant with these Canaanites. Now, this is not the first time somebody in Canaan has been rescued from the conquest. Because remember, Rahab, she was her and her family were rescued because of how she protected the spies and made an agreement with them, and she and her family were incorporated into the people of Israel. And so this is a similar situation, but instead of a family, it is now cities that are a part of the community, and so it's cities of Canaanites who are a part of this community of the people. And so the murmuring of all of the people, and they're trying to work out a deal, but it is still not a good idea to not inquire of the Lord. And so that is the first the first of these major city groups to not be defeated militarily. But it turns out that all of the kings that we were introduced to in chapter 9, verse 1, they hear that the Gibeonites have made an agreement with the people. And so chapter 10 then shifts over to how other kings are going to now treat the Gibeonites. And so this is one of those stories in Joshua that people have heard, but sometimes we lose sight of the reason for the events, because the sun's going to stand still, giant stones are going to fall from the sky, could be hailstones, whatever it is, like the Lord is fighting for them. But it is the motivation here is because Joshua and the Israelites have made a treaty with the Gibeonites, and so they are coming to protect their treaty mates, so the people in their alliance. So chapter 10, verse 1. Now Adonai-Zedek, and that means the Lord my king. So Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, but doing to Ai and its king what he had done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and had become their allies. He and his people were very much alarmed at this, because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. So Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, "Do not abandon your servant. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us." So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. And they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah. The Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel. Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ayajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down until about a full day. There's never been a day like it, or before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. And so all the kings in Canaan, not all of them, but a good number of them, come together and they attack Gibeon, and Gibeon cries out, because Gibeon is a strategic city. And I have a map here. I'm going to show you some of these things here. Let me share my screen. Share screen. And click the button and then share this. Okay, share. All right. Can you all see that? Okay, so this is the Dead Sea, Jericho right here. The camp. Oh, back up. Camp here at Gilgal. And so Gibeon is right here. And Gibeon has it's got a little valley area there where people can travel through it between two hilly mountainous regions. And so it's a strategic place. And so for all these other kings, so Ajalon, Jarmuth, Jerusalem, all these other kings, hearing that Gibeon has made this treaty, they see this as a strategic advantage for the Israelites and a threat for themselves. And so they are coming together to attack Gibeon from all these areas going this way. So Joshua and the people of Israel, they disembark from their camp and they head over here. It's about a 3-day trip, as I said, and they travel over there overnight. So travel at night was dangerous. It was difficult to do because there weren't lights and stuff, but they worked all the way over there. And essentially, it's a surprise to all these kings that the army of Israel is here. And so that's part of the reason why it throws all of the people into confusion. And because they weren't expecting the people of Israel to get there so quickly. Now, another quick little interesting fact here. This passage is the first time Jerusalem is mentioned in the Old Testament. Previously, we met Melchizedek, who was the king of Salem. Salem could be Jerusalem, after hundreds of years, but this is the first time the name Jerusalem is listed in the Bible. And so they start the battle. The battle starts fighting, and the people are the 5 kings are confused, but they are also they're confused. Why is Israel here? What's happening? They probably start fighting against each other even. And then the Lord also starts throwing these giant hailstones as they start to run away. And so these hailstones are like taking out the army of all these kings, and the people of Israel are essentially just keeping up with the Lord's attack. And the key piece for the people is to say, look at how the Lord is fighting for us. Look at how the Lord is fighting on our behalf. He is doing things that we could never do on our own. And here's one of those moments where we see another extra canonical book that is we don't have in the Old Testament, the book of Jashar, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. And so it's referenced again in 2 Samuel. And this is some book that captures some of these kinds of events. And the title could be an adjective for upright. So like these are the right actions, or for the verb form for sing. And so it could be like epic songs about how the Lord has intervened for his people. So, which we have other epic songs, like after the crossing of the Red Sea, Moses teaches the people a song of God's saving work. The book of Psalms has a bunch of songs in it. Some of them are epic, like story songs talking about all that God has done for the people. But this conflict is, it goes on for a while. And then Joshua calls out to the Lord to make the sun stop. And this is one of those things where it's unusual. Like this doesn't happen, right? So this is a miracle. And this would have created even more confusion for the people, as they could have seen the moon and the sun at the same time for a long time, like for a day, like the sun didn't set. And when people read passages like this, there's two responses that we see often is people say, well, let's try to prove it and let's math it out. And let's go find Joshua's extra day. Like, where could that have happened? And I've seen people try to make those kinds of arguments. But then there's other response is to say this couldn't possibly happen, so the whole book is nonsense. And for the people of Israel, like this was an event that was formative to their identity. It is something like referencing to another book. The book of Joshua is one of the ways that they could have said, like, no, it really happened. It was written down again over here by these other people. And we don't know who would have written that book. But all of these different efforts to try to prove or disprove a story like this, they're not going to be as fruitful as people want them to be, because we cannot prove or disprove it. And one of the things that really messes up our efforts to try to date things or to find the missing day is they were not as concerned with precision on calendars as we are now. They didn't have leap years or leap seconds. They didn't do that kind of stuff. And so like their whole efforts to track the sun and the moon, like for seasons and stuff, like there's a totally different calendar than what we would try to do. So we shouldn't try to like get hung up on like, where is this extra day? But as the people see God continuing to fight for them, it is an indication for them that the Lord is fighting for them, but also that the Lord is using Joshua the same way he used Moses. Because remember Moses, when they were fighting, he raised up his staff and they were able to continue to have victory as long as Moses' staff was raised. Joshua held out his javelin at Ai and they conquered. And now Joshua is telling the Lord, he doesn't ask, he tells the Lord, make the sun and moon stand still. And it happens. And so the anointing and the power that Moses displayed is now in Joshua's life as well. And so, yes, the Lord is fighting on their behalf, but he's also leading them with Joshua. And so they are winning these victories. But in verse 16, we see that the 5 kings had fled and hidden in the cave of Makkedah. When Joshua was told that the 5 kings had been found hiding at the cave of Makkedah, he said, roll large rocks up to the mouth of the cave and post some men there to guard it. But don't stop. Pursue your enemies. Attack them from the rear and don't let them reach their cities, for the Lord your God has given them into your hands. And so the kings are on the run and they basically trap them in a cave. These large stones, they could have been the large hailstones, like roll those up. Because now they have access to these large stones. And so there's some question like that, was that what they were using? But then he also says, so we got them trapped, keep chasing down all of those other armies. Don't let them get to cities, because if they can get to the cities, then they can build a defense in the city. And so we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely, but a few survivors managed to reach their fortified cities. The whole army then returned safely to Joshua in the camp of Makkedah, and no one uttered a word against the Israelites. Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me." So they brought the 5 kings out of the cave, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. When they had brought these kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with them, "Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings." So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Joshua then said, "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight." Then Joshua put the kings to death and exposed their bodies on 5 poles, and they were left hanging on the poles until evening. At sunset, Joshua gave the order, and they took them down from the poles and threw them into the cave where they had been hiding. At the mouth of the cave, they placed large rocks, which are there to this day. And so here they are. They go defeat those armies. Most of the armies, a few people get away. But then they also have this symbolic victory over these kings by, first of all, having the leaders of the army put their feet on the necks of the kings. And this is a victory pose, essentially saying, like, everywhere you put your feet, remember, this is what the Lord said to Joshua at the beginning of the book, everywhere you set your feet, I'm giving to you. And so now Joshua is echoing that kind of language to the leaders of the military and saying, like, you've put your feet on the neck of these kings, like their cities, they belong to you. The Lord is giving them into your hand. And then he also repeats what was said earlier: do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, be strong and courageous. And so the same commissioning statement that was given to Joshua, he is giving now to the leaders of the army to say, be strong and courageous. The Lord will fight for you. And so then they execute these kings. And by putting them up on poles, this was potentially a sign to anybody who may have any stragglers or anybody watching them from a distance. To see these kings up on the poles was a sign to say, we have defeated these 5 armies, and the same thing is going to happen to you. And part of the humane treatment of corpses is they were commanded to not leave bodies exposed overnight. And so they take them down. They don't just leave them up there for the birds to eat their flesh. They take them down and they seal them back up in the cave. And so those 5 kings are defeated. Now, these 5 kings, they are, this battle started because these 5 kings came against an ally of the people of Israel. And so Joshua and the army of Israel defended their allies. So the battle continues. And in verse 28, it says, that day Joshua took Makkedah. He put the city and its king to the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it. He left no survivors, and he did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved from Makkedah to Libnah and attacked it. The Lord also gave that city and its king into Israel's hands. The city and everyone in it Joshua put to the sword. Sorry, my computer is acting up. Put to the sword. He left no survivors there. And he did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Libnah to Lachish. He took up positions against it and attacked it. The Lord gave Lachish in Israel's hands, and Joshua took it on the second day. The city and everyone in it he put to the sword, just as he had done at Libnah. Meanwhile, Horam, king of Gezer, had come up to Lachish, but Joshua defeated him and his army until no survivors were left. Then Joshua and all Israel went with him and moved on from Lachish to Eglon. They took up positions against it and attacked it. They captured it and the same day and put it to the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it, just as they had done to Lachish. Then Joshua and all Israel went up with him from Eglon to Hebron and attacked it. They took the city and put it to the sword together with its king, the villages, and everyone in it. They left no survivors, just as Eglon. They totally destroyed it and everyone in it. Then Joshua and all Israel went with him and attacked Debir. They took the city, its king, and its villages, and put them to the sword Everyone in it they totally destroyed. They left no survivors. They did to Debir and its king as they had done to Libnah and the king and to Hebron. So Joshua subdued the whole region, including the hill country, the Negev, the western foothills, and the mountain slopes. Together with all their kings, he left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua subdued them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from the whole region of Goshen to Gibeon. All these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. Now, this is a lot of violence, a lot of bloodshed, a lot of war, no survivors. This is not something that we really, like to talk about in the Bible, like these kinds of campaigns. It makes people feel uncomfortable. It makes us question, like, why would God want this kind of violence? And I'm pulling up the map again so you can see the range here. Part of the thing that we have to remember as we read through all of the historical books in Joshua and the conquest, the reason the Lord is driving these people out and destroying these different kingdoms is because of their sinfulness and their pagan ways. Again, this is not something that the Lord is commanding people to do ever again. This is part of receiving the land. And so there's a lot of things where I'm like, well, why couldn't they all make treaties like Gibeon? But what we will see is the people of Israel did not fully drive out all of these folks. And the very thing that the Lord warned them about happened, because all of the survivors in these further areas, they all eventually led the people into idolatry and to turn away from the Lord. And so the Lord was right in saying, like, you need to drive them out, or else they're going to be a thorn in your side. And so the campaign starts up here in Jericho and then works down this way up to, sorry, let me zoom in a bit, up here to where, into Gibeon area. And then it goes down up this way as they're attacking all of these different cities. And there's a little key here. This green one is King Horam coming down to Lachish to fight with the people of Lachish, let the people of Israel defeat them. And then they go to Eglon, Debir, and Hebron, and then they make their way all the way back up here to Gilgal. And so this is the attack, or the campaign in the southern kingdom. And so Israel is bigger than just the southern kingdom. And so it's actually going to be all the way up to, like, this is the Sea of Galilee up here, and where the thing is moving. And so that's going to be the next section, is what Joshua is going to do up in this region. But the divide and conquer strategy, like all these kings in chapter 9, verse 1, were talking about coming together to fight against the people of Israel. And Joshua and the army of Israel, because of the Lord was on their side, was able to go through this campaign and essentially eliminate the major threats in the south before then attacking the kings of the north. But that is what chapter 11 will get into right now. When Jabin, king of Hatzor, heard of this, when Jabin, king of Hatzor, heard of this, he sent word to Jobab, king of Madon, to the kings of Shimron and Aksheph, and the northern kings who were in the mountains, in the Arabah south of Kinneret, in the western foothills, in the Naphoth Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and west, to the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites below Hermon in the region of Mizpah. They came out with all their troops and a large number of horses and chariots, a huge army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. All these kings joined forces and made camp together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them slain over to Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." So Joshua and his whole army came against them suddenly at the waters of Merom and attacked them, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel. They defeated them and pursued them all the way to Greater Sidon, to Meresfoth Maim, and to the valley of Mitzpah on the east, until no survivors were left. Joshua did to them as the Lord had directed. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots. At the same time, Joshua turned back and captured Hatzor and put its king to the sword. Hatzor had been the head of all these kingdoms. Everyone in it they put to the sword. They totally destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed. And he burned Hatzor itself. So all these northern kings decide to come together and to attack. And the army is huge and with strong weapons and strategic advancements, like the chariot. This was a major advancement. The chariot was something that could move quickly, and you could have somebody with an arrow or spears, attacking folks that, they could not really defend against if they did not have their own chariots. And so, so it's overwhelming. They should not win this battle because all these kings are coming together, and the people of Israel are just one nation. Now there are many warriors among the people of Israel at this point, but still they are at a strategic disadvantage. But the Lord delivers them into their hands. And part of the instructions here is to completely destroy everything that they were using against the people of Israel. And so, like, they capture these armies, they defeat these armies, and like you would think, well, take their weapons, take their strategic advantage and use it for yourself. So they could have said, let's take their chariots and horses, and now we can go and advance the army quicker. But the Lord says, don't do that. Don't take their chariots, don't take their horses. And later on in the Bible, it will say, some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we will trust in the Lord our God. And this is one of those areas where this is what that's echoing back to, is like, you could try to be the most powerful military force in the world, but when the Lord is on your side, you don't need that. You don't need the horses. You don't need the chariots. And so the Lord's instructions to hamstring the horses, which is essentially it's literally cutting their what would be our Achilles tendon, make it so they can't move, and kill the horse and destroy the chariots, is saying, like, don't even pretend like you could do this on your own. Trust me completely. And so Joshua does exactly that. They defeat all of these kings, and Hatzor, which is the city that was organizing all these people, they completely burn to the ground and destroy, like they had with Jericho and Ai. Verse 12 says, Joshua took all these royal cities and their kings and put them to the sword. He totally destroyed them as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. Yet Israel did not burn any of the cities built on their mounds, except Hatzor, which Joshua burned. The Israelites carried off for themselves all the plunder and livestock of these cities, other than Hatzor, but all the people they put to the sword until they completely destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed, as the Lord commanded his servant Moses. So Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. He left nothing undone of all the Lord commanded Moses. So Joshua took this entire land, the hill country, all the Negev, the whole region of Goshen, the western foothills, the Arabah, the mountains of Israel, and their foothills from Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir, to Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon below Mount Hermon. He captured all their kings and put them to death. Joshua waged war against all these kings for a long time, except for the Hivites living in Gibeon. Not one city made a treaty of peace with the Israelites, who took them all in battle. For it was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel. so that he might destroy them totally, exterminating them without mercy, as the Lord had commanded Moses. At that time, Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. No Anakites were left in the Israelite territory. Only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did any survive. So Joshua took the entire land, just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal divisions. Then the land had rest from war. All right, so let's look at the route here that the people of the Israelites took for the northern campaign. Let me share this screen with you. All right, so this is the route up into the northern area. And so as you can see, we zoom in, that's the Mediterranean Sea. We zoom in here, this is where they're camping. And so they have to travel up along the Jordan River, all the way to Merom, essentially. And this is where they are fighting. And so the king of Hatzor is getting all of these different kingdoms together to fight against Israel. So they go over here to fight Israel in Mitzpah, and then they come over to the north, all the way up here to Sidon, which is in Lebanon, which is really far north. That's like, it's not real, that's not part of Israel, you know, it's the way up there. And then they come down here to the southern area along the coast of the sea to fight all of these kingdoms, and they win and they win and they win. All they do is win, 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 no matter what. So, you know, that Joshua is doing what Moses commanded. Moses was told to do these things by the Lord, and so Joshua is an example of faithfulness for the people. There's also this language about the Anakites, which are they end up in Gath, which is where the Philistines. So Gath is, let's see if it's on this map. Gath is down here, but they didn't include it on this map. Maybe it's not. Yeah, so Gaza and Beersheba, like Gath is along the coast here. That's where the Anakites were. The Anakites are believed to be the Philistines. Anakites were also part of there's tradition that says that the Anakites are somehow connected to the Nephilim of Genesis 6. And so they are giants, they're mighty warriors. And so they are somehow tied to two dark spiritual forces interacting with humanity. And so this is part of the Holy War, is eliminating these kinds of threats from the land for the people of Israel, so that they don't have to worry about the Anakites anymore. And so Joshua did all of those things, pushing them out further and further. And then it says, and Joshua secured peace. The land had peace from war. And so those are the two major campaigns in the book of Joshua, the southern campaign and the northern campaign. And so chapter 12 then lists all that Joshua had done. And so these are the kings of the land whom Israelite had defeated and whose territory they took over east of the Jordan from the Arnon Gorge to Mount Hermon, including all the eastern side of the Arabah. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon. No, the map won't have all that stuff. All right, sorry. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon. He ruled from Eror on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, from the middle of the gorge to the Jabbok River, to the border of the Ammonites. This included half of Gilead. He also ruled over the eastern of Arabah, of the Sea of Galilee, to the Sea of the Arabah. This is the Dead Sea, to Bet Jamosh, and then southward below the slopes of Pisgah. And the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the last of the Rephaites who reigned in Ashtaroth in Edrei. He ruled over Mount Hermon, Selikah, all of Bashan, and to the border of the people of Gesher and Makkah and Gilead, and the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the Israelites conquered them. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh to be their possession. We read about that at the end of the book of Numbers, how those 2.5 tribes wanted to stay on the east side of the Jordan. Here's a list of the kings of the land Joshua and the Israelites conquered on the west side of the Jordan, from Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir. Joshua gave their lands and the inheritance to the tribes of Israel, according to the tribal divisions. The lands included the hill country, the western foothills, the Arabah, the mountain slopes, the wilderness of the Negev. These were the lands of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. These are the kings. And then it gives a list of all of the kings and counts off for us how many kings, one of each. And so I'm not going to read all of those. But at the very end there in verse 24, 31 kings in all are defeated. That's 31 cities, 31 enemies of the people of God. Joshua won all of those victories, and only one of those kings, one of those battles, do we read any kind of indication of anything close to a defeat. So even Ai wasn't a full defeat because they only sent a small portion and they were driven back. And so then they're like, why, Lord, why? Well, they didn't consult the Lord, and that was part of it. And so, and then with Gibeon, we don't have a defeat for the people of Gibeon because they entered into a covenant with them, an oath of peace. So all of these kings are listed in the order in which we read about them in the conquest, but that it wraps up that first half of Joshua focusing on the conquest. Now there are areas in the land that we're still going to have people who are not following the Lord, and that will become a problem for the people of Israel in their future from this point, and we will continue reading about this. The book of Judges is dealing a lot of with those problems with the Philistines, and then invading armies from other sides of the Jordan River and from the north, and so but a lot of the problems for the people of Israel comes down to they were unwilling to, but they did not actually fully drive out and eliminate all of the threats. So any questions on Joshua chapters 9 through 12?
About how long did this take, these two campaigns?
I don't know. That, I did not get a list of months that this took, but the first campaign, when we read about that, it says on that day they did this, this, and this. So it's like in one day they defeated like 3 kings sometimes, right? So it seems like it happened quickly, but we are not given in this section like on the day of this month or anything like that. So it's hard to know. So yeah, but the Northern Kingdom campaign, like most of that was happening in one place because all of those kings were able to come together. And then Joshua went town to town. So the major battle happened and then he wiped out the towns. So yeah. Any other questions, thoughts? All right.
I kind of have one. It might be kind of weird.
Okay.
Going back to Joshua 9:27, when the Canaanites, they made them be woodcutters and water carriers.
Right.
That's for the temple, correct?
Yeah, for the tabernacle at this point. So they're preparing all of the wood that was used for the fires of the altar and the water that was used for cleaning the sacrifices.
Okay. I was
So-
just wondering because I put notes, how can the Canaanites who are liars even be associated with the temple?
Yeah. Well, because the people didn't consult the Lord before entering into an oath. And so they had to honor the oath that we're not going to eliminate you. But they were then also essentially enslaved to the people of Israel because they were liars.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One of those things, read the fine print.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just the story as I was reading through this week on this was like, where are you from? Far away. What's
Sounds
it
like
called?
Star Wars.
It's called over there somewhere. It's like, this is not like they didn't even try to investigate them, it feels like. And so that's one of those frustrations that I have with this story is like, you didn't even put in any investigative effort into these people other than looking at how gross their bread was.
Mhm.
So, and like even the bread, like bringing the bread to them, it could have been a part of a ritual of like sharing a meal together, like as we're making an oath. And the people like look at the bread, they sample it, which could have been as simply as like, well, yeah, it's pretty gross. We don't want any of this. So it was, I mean, how hard is it to find moldy bread? It's not hard. Like,
Not to
I'm
mention-
sure I have some in my house. Like, I don't know. We don't need a lot of bread. So,
I think too, maybe these people are trying to poison me. Hello.
yeah, I mean, we don't have any indication on that here. The Gibeonites were crafty, and that's all we're told. So,
Interesting
Yeah.
bunch of people.
yeah. Any other thoughts?
Mm. Not really much.
Yeah.
I think it's very impressive. I mean, that with God's backing, Joshua defeated all these people.
Mm-hmm.
That is very impressive.
Yes, the Lord was fighting for Israel over and over again. That is the theme that keeps coming up. The Lord was fighting for Israel. Yeah, it is very violent and very not politically correct part of Scripture, but we can't ignore that it's in here. So,
Mhm.
yeah. All right. Well, y'all, if there aren't any other questions or anything, then we can wrap up our time. So next week we are going to be reading, I chunked it out. Here it is. So next week we're going to be reading through 13 through 17 of Joshua. So we have 3 more weeks in Joshua, just as a heads up. And so a lot of this is going to be some lists. There's a lot of lists coming up. So just prepare yourself. Lists and land, and I have maps that I found in my Bible software. So like, let me show you what, and I was hoping to get here it is. The tribal inheritance is what we're going to be getting to. Let me show you what this is looking like. You'll be seeing more of this in the future. So these are the different tribes and where they're going to be. So this is Judah, and then Benjamin is this stripy area. Yeah, so that's what the land is going to look like, how it's all going to be divided up. So yeah, we're going to read about this. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So, all right. Well, y'all, I will see you on Sunday, or I'll see you next week. And yeah, God bless.
Thanks very much.
You guys
you.
have a great night.
Night.